That is a handy tip. All right, so this is not a how-to Hobie video. This is a video on how to optimize your kayak, whatever brand it is, for kayak fishing. But first, I'm going for a fish. Right, so we're back in the shed. The weather wasn't too great out there. Not a lot of big fish, lots of small fish, a lot of fun for a morning. So today we're going to be talking about kayak fishing and the setup of your kayak in particular. Now, yes, I've got the Ferrari of kayaks, the 2020 360 Hobie Pro Angler 14, which I guess is the top of the line. And this kayak is set up for my tournament season. It's probably about a 90% solution. There's a couple of things I will change. There are going to be some pretty cool generic tips in here that'll help you on your way to a kayak fishing adventure that aren't specifically Hobie kayak orientated. I'm going to split the video up into a few different points and talk about the cockpit setup itself, then talk about the electronics, and then the Livewell that I've got sitting down there, and how I use that front hatch and the in-hull storage as well. So let's get into it. I reckon the most important part to figure out is in your kayak how you're going to set up what side the sounder's on and what side the rod holder's on. Now, in most models you get to choose left or right, but in some you don't get the choice. If you do get the choice, I'd recommend having a think about which hand you actually fight the fish with. For me, my rod's in the right and I reel with my left. That means that my left hand is free to hit either mark on the sounder or manipulate that 360 handle or the rudder on the left-hand side. It makes sense then that after I pick up the fish, net it, I put the net back down and the rod can go into the right-hand side there. You might consider swapping all of this around if you like to hold your rod with your left hand and reel with the right. Now, to flow on from that, because my sounder is quite large, that means that when drifting, I prefer to fish out this side because I have nothing in the way. If so facto, my anchor trolley is on that side where my drogue chutes deploy. I'd really encourage you to comment below and let me know if there are any tips and tricks that have worked for you. Now, while we're in the space, I'm actually working on a kayak versus kayak video at the moment, as well as some gear versus gear and a catch and cook. If any of that stuff's interested you or you've liked what you've seen today, make sure you hit that like button down there and smash that subscribe so you get notifications of what's coming up. The Pro Angler 14, like it has for a number of years now, has 6 horizontal rod holders, 3 each side. And I'm a huge fan of the horizontal storage. For me, I don't like rods vertical, particularly sitting behind me, because I like to cast overhead, and that increases the chances of me hitting other rods or taking tips off. And I never like that idea. Now, while I'm talking about rod storage, you might be familiar with these rod holder brackets that sit on the sides of the PA. You'll see here that mine are one rotation off, I don't know, they're probably about 15 to 20 degrees off the vertical. But I really like it like that because it allows me to get rods in and out easier than it would if they were all stacked on top of each other. You'll see also in the center hatch, I don't use the tackle management system that Hobie provide. In the center hatch, I use a gear bucket. In here go my scents, my scales, scissors, pliers, jig heads, and any small tackle boxes that fit in there. I think this is one of the best upgrades that you can get in the Hobie itself. Some guys like to put their power solutions in the center hatch here. I don't do any of that. Mine's up the front. Aside from the white Hobie tackle bin, there's nothing else in there. So the Hobie PA 2020 series still has these horizontal mounting plates that I've got to be honest, I don't really use. You've got the rail system as well as a couple of sockets to throw some pliers or some knives in if you consider it being offshore. But the thing that has always prevented me from doing that is the fact that my feet go forward and aft right here, right next to it. And if I've got bare feet, I don't like the idea of a naked blade, a flopping fish, and my feet in the same area. Over the past few years, I've actually drilled these out and not had the plates on them. And I find that that can actually be helpful with trying to get these rod tips in the horizontal storage at night. And I'll probably run them for the next couple of months to work out whether they suit this kayak or not. So I'm also a guy that's generally estuaries, so rivers, lakes, dams, that type of thing. So I don't find the requirement to tether all my gear in when it comes to rods, reels, and all those little bits of gear that I've got around the kayak. Whilst I'm on the water, the scissors and the pliers realistically go anywhere. Now I'm right-handed, so I generally bias them off to the right on the deck of the kayak. Now understand, some kayaks you don't have the space that you do here. Tethering your gear adds a little bit of complexity, and if there was a risk that I'd capsize or the waves were big, I'd definitely use the straps to strap my gear in. I'd say if you're in a kayak where it's decided that you need to screw and drill things in, I'd definitely consider sitting in the kayak and working out where things are in terms of your arm's reach. I've seen people before have sounders and things down here near their feet. Now, whilst that might work for some, it's definitely not going to work for somebody like me that likes to manipulate their sounder and store waypoints constantly. Having something near your feet is probably just a bit too far away from me. I think trial and error is pretty important when it comes to the cockpit space, because that's the part that you're engaging in. That's the bit that's making things enjoyable. If you're constantly twisting and turning, well, that's just going to take that little bit of enjoyability out of it for you. So take your time, get on the water a few times, and work out where you want to put your gear before you drill it in. Now, in terms of electronics, I run the Lowrance HCS12 live unit. It's got some really nice charting on it. The side imaging is not bad, and neither is the down scan with the traditional scan overlay running on it. I really like the unit, but it does need a fair bit of power. So in the front hatch, I've got two 17.5 amp hour FPV Kayak batteries, and they're from a brand that specializes in that lithium ion tech for the kayak batteries. So they're uber lightweight and mounted in tandem, so there's no switching between them whilst I'm on the water. I'd say though, for anything below and including a 9-inch sounder, you don't need the two. You'll definitely 100% get away with one. The FPV batteries are compatible with these Burley Pro shaft mount attachments that screw into the back of the battery itself, and they allow for an easy click option on Hobies in particular, because you can click them in and out of the shaft mount when needed. Again, they're handy for keeping the power solutions away from the water, so you can try and avoid some corrosion. So the last point that every kayaker needs to consider is transducer mounting, whether that goes on the inside or the outside. Now, internally, there are some great options. You can goop them in. I'd just say with the goop, make sure it's completely dry before you move it. I've run into problems where I thought the thing was dry, drove around, found there were bubbles everywhere. To get around that, you can go for a wet mount that takes a little bit more engineering, but both methods shoot through the hole without a problem. I've always found the cleanest and crispest picture to come from whenever my transducer is mounted on the outside. Now, the thing that you need to consider whenever mounting the transducer externally is how you're going to protect that valuable transducer. Now, Burley Pro have a range of transducer covers that'll help you out here, and you can see here I've got one mounted on the Guardian plate that sits underneath the kayak. Now, there's no effect on the image, but it means if I forget to throw that Guardian plate back up and retract the transducer into the hull, I'm A-OK, the cover wears the damage, and the transducer's good to go. There's a HWS link below with all the Burley Pro products on it, and you can order whatever you need online. So outside the sounder, there's another 3 bits of electronics that I roll around with. The first one is the Livewell and the Livewell pump that's in there. I use the stock standard battery that comes with the Livewell, and there's no problems with that. Eventually I probably will move over to a lithium ion one, but this one's serving me the right purpose for the moment. The second last item is PowerPole's micro anchor that has the 8-foot spike that sits on the back of it. It's got that as well, it's got the lithium ion pack on the front, and it is worth its weight in gold. Now, I understand the power poles aren't exactly the cheapest. If you can't afford it for the moment, I'd definitely get some sort of spike. I know Hobie do a spike, but there are some spikes out there that you can just drive into the dirt in one of your scupper holes. It's in the middle of the kayak, and that'll keep you stationary for a period of time. Now, the last bit of electronics that I'll be running for the 2020 series is the Hydrowave Mini. It's the Australian saltwater edition there. I don't know if the focus is right, but there it is there. Jury's out on these bad boys. I'm gonna give it a go for the year. Works off a little battery system there. But this system here is specifically designed for schools of mullet that are either in a passive or a frenzy mode. So we'll see how that goes. Right, so on the electronics bracket, ever so slightly different though, is the camera gear that you might like to use whilst kayak fishing. Now, yes, the thing that I'm filming on at the moment is a Canon SLR. It's a mirrorless M50 that's quite small and compact. It keeps everything kind of nice for me, but I'm really hesitant to use it around the salt water, particularly if I'm fishing or it's raining, because I don't want to damage it. What I tend to use, however, is the GoPro. Now, this is an old GoPro 3 or 4 that I use. To be honest, there's some really good discounts and some older ones over there that'll film in 1080p at 30 frames or whatever frame rate that suits your style. Yes, you can have the latest GoPro 8, and yes, I did just acquire a couple of those, and that was because of the stabilization system that's in them. Outside of that though, I think the most powerful camera that you can use for your kayak is your mobile phone. Now, yes, Again, we come into that situation where some phones are waterproof and some aren't. And that lens that you've got on the end there isn't always the best on some models, but you'll see here I've got a case, and on that case, a wide angle lens. Super handy, particularly with getting those wider shots so you're not constricted into the cockpit, and they really help make a fish look extraordinary. Now we'll take the opportunity to thank Hunter Watersports for hooking us up with the GoPro 8. It's got that stabilization on it. I'm really looking forward to it. I've got a chesty mount, so I reckon in the kayak that's actually a really nice angle. When it's sitting on the chest here, you get to see the reeling, the fish, and the netting all really nicely. Now back to the GoPro, the thing that I use for it is a couple of extension pieces here with this grip-like GoPro attachment. Don't ask me what it's called, but I've actually bought 2 of them, and I've connected all these things together to make an extra long one. Seems to work pretty well for me. Snaps back in and you're good to go. At the front of the kayak, you can see the gimbal that I used, but this is the gimbal where the phone sits, like this, with the lens on it, taking the shot of yours truly. So that's electronics done, let's get into storage. Now I've got another tip here that is Hobie specific. It's got to do with the front hatch liner. Definitely Pro Angler 12 and 14. Don't quote me on Outback, I'm not sure how well it goes, but you can see in here that Hobie have got the double seals. There's a seal on the hatch lid and a seal on the bottom of the hatch. Now this bottom of the hatch has always been there. That one there is a new addition, but you'll notice I do not use the hatch white liner. Actually, that's a lie. I do use it, and that's it there. It gets stored and used for the resale value for the next bloke so that I've got a full kayak when I do sell this kayak. The reason is because the seals here, and here's another picture of it, if you choose to use the liner, you will break the double seal that's installed on it, and in my opinion, the double seal works really good and keeps everything in here watertight. So in the front hatch, I do use Hobie's cooler bag that is specifically designed for the front hatch. It keeps everything nice, so you'll find here that I keep my camera gear, some GoPros, memory cards, some lures that I'm thinking about using, but importantly my lunch also goes in there, so that keeps it nice and warm. That lining typically is the entire way around, but I've had this bag for about 5 years and that lining's kind of come off the front there, so it is just a normal bag. It'll keep everything cool, including ice drinks that can be a real treat in the afternoon. So I've talked about front storage, I've talked about the center hatch, now for the rear. I have the Hobie XL Livewell on there because most of my competitions are all catch and release, and I don't really have an option. Definitely a favorite among most anglers is to have some sort of crate-like solution in the back where you can have rods coming out of rod guns, gear sitting in there, tackle boxes, nets, and everything arranged in the rearward space that is directly behind you in most kayaks. Personally, this is where I'd load up the majority of the gear if I was on some sort of crate-like system. You'll also notice there is a rear hatch on the Hobie, and most kayaks actually have that rear hatch. Some people do like to use it for your power systems as opposed to where I have it at the front. And the main reason I have it at the front is because this is 50 kilos of weight when it's full, and I don't want to be too tail heavy in terms of balance of the kayak. The last point I'll make reference storage is the seat back storage. Some of you might have noticed that I've got a Hobie gear bag that's strapped to the back of my Hobie Vantage seat there, and I really think that this is an underrated area on most kayaks. All you need to do while sitting there is turn around to be able to access what you've got here. With this bag in particular, there's one main compartment and a sleeve here. In the main compartment, I usually throw some plastics, and in the sleeve, I've got my leaders and line. There is a clip for any key tags that you want to hold, as well as the bottom here, a drainage area, if you do happen to be operating in the rain. Storage on the back seat is definitely a good idea. Now, the last area I keep things in terms of storage is under the seat itself. You can see here, I've got 1, 2 tackle boxes. In this center hatch, as I get rid of that random bolt, in this center hatch, I used to have 7 or 8 different tackle boxes spread all through the hull itself. I then realized, really, most of my favorite lures I can fit into one. There was definitely a propensity for me when I first started kayak fishing or tournament fishing to carry everything I needed, but I always just found myself throwing my favorite lures. So that there is a box of, say, my 30 to 40 favorite lures that I know that will work for me in most situations. But I change this one out depending on the area that I'm fishing. If it's creature baits, then they go there. I don't really have much more tackle on there because I find I don't need it. Now I talked about the anchor trolley before, and here's some video of it being installed into this kayak, but you can see it runs the length of the kayak with a couple of ball bearings and adjustment tools at each end. It's really handy. When you grab the loops to attach your drogue chute here, you can then move the item to the front or to the rear while sitting inside the cockpit to change the angle that you're sitting at if you're a little bit odd on the wind. Now the last hot tip that I've got to share you is with the net. So you always want it in a location that's easy to grab and then net a fish, but you want it out of the way so that you can reel a fish in or do whatever you need to do in the cockpit area and it's not in the way. For the pro angler, I'll show you where I put it, but this method works on anything with a large kind of frontal nose area and has got to do with magnets. So you'll see on this net, this is a Berkeley net, it's got an extra long handle, and I think on the kayaks the extra long handle is really important. Why? It means that when you're fighting the fish from back here, I can reach out with a much greater length and collect the fish. It means less vertical angle with your lures and less hook angle on that line and less probability that you're gonna pop the hooks out of the fish's mouth and decrease the likelihood that you'll lose the fish right next to the kayak. How often do you hear about guys losing fish right next to the kayak? Anyway, in terms of storage on the PA, on the front hatch, and I'll show you that now. Don't quote me on the brand, I think it might even be Samaki, but any magnet brand will do. So you can see it's zip tied here on the side, a little bit of a magnet, bit of corrosion there, no big deal because I've had it for a bit. But this is one of the pieces that I'm still waiting on, and my friend James is gonna hook me up next week. But go to the hardware store and find a screw that is longer than this one. This is the stock standard one, but you can get one that's ever so longer and find a little clip and screw a little clip that attaches to it and then add your magnet in there. Now you can do this with any kayak, it doesn't need to be at the front hatch of a PA. So that magnet, when placed on the hatch there, after you net a fish, come up, drop your net, and the net will stay where you've placed it last. That is a handy tip. Now, I found that solving the problem of how to set up your kayak is something that evolves year after year. I might like it one way for a period of time and then another. I'd really encourage you to comment below and let me know if there are any tips and tricks that have worked for you. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the clip. Until next time.